The Dallas Cowboys defense was awful in week 2, but their problems are actually fixable. We'll tell you how next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and on today's show, we are breaking down the all-22 film from the Cowboys' Week 2 win over the New York Giants. We're going to talk about the offense. We'll talk about a big injury on the offensive line. But let's start with the defense. They gave up 500 total yards in this game to the Giants. It was one of the worst performances I've seen from them. Now, luckily, they got the win, so it's okay. But do you have any faith that the Cowboys can fix this unit over the next couple months?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, first of all, we've talked about the fact that you still got Overshown coming back, who I think is a huge piece of this defense, but you're not totally counting on him. But I think just adds another guy who can go out there and make plays. I think that also that this is one of the situations that we've talked about where you've got a lot of young pieces on this defensive line, specifically on the edge at this point. And as time goes on, you hope that those guys continue to get better and improve. And I think that that's kind of where you're waiting for it right now, because I think that's where you're seeing a lot of these issues where, guys like Ezeraku is just not consistent enough. Sam Williams is just not, enough for all the snaps that we're getting there. And I think it's causing obviously issues on the back end. And I think with some of the coverage stuff, you go back and watch it, it looks like there was a lot of just miscommunications, a lot of, specifically it's felt like a lack of rerouting wide receivers as they tried to get vertical through the middle of your defense. So I think there's a lot of coaching points on both sides of the ball of things where it feels like it could get cleaned up a little bit. But I think that, it's going to have to be, working on the edges a little bit. You're adding Clowney. You're hoping that you can tighten things up a little bit in the pass rush, which will help in the back end a little bit. And then just hoping clean up the communication will just help tighten up, which is what is very clearly a zone heavy defense at this point.
So I will say, at least for Chicago under Matt Eberflus, their defense was awful to start, and it gradually got better as the season went on and as the years went on, right? And by the time they got to right before he got fired, it was a pretty respectable unit. Now, we're talking about fixing this defense going from awful to average, right? I don't think anybody believes that this defense is going to be like a top 10 unit or anything like that. And frankly, they don't need to be, right? Like if they can be an average NFL defense, you'll take that all day long. I think the issues are how long before they get there, and can they get there this year?
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of it is the scheme and what they're running because of the corners, right? The other part is you've got some defensive linemen that I think, and we can talk about it, like you want to see more from. And I'll give you an example. Sam Williams, who the Cowboys were talking about extending before the season. You and I pushed back on that quite a bit. We just haven't seen enough from someone like Sam Williams, who they believe is going to be a really good player. We just haven't seen it yet, really, ever in his NFL career.
Well, we've seen it in spurts, but just in spurts, enough to get us excited, right? And that's the thing, is that like last year was supposed to be his big breakout, and then obviously got delayed to this year. And it just feels like the issue that I'm having is not that like, oh, he's not as explosive as he was. It's that I don't feel like, it's the other part of what happens when you get injured. You miss time to develop, right? And it just feels like we aren't seeing a very developed guy. When I see him line up wide and try to bend the curve and get around a guy, like he can do that. But when I see him try to engage with an offensive tackle and have a plan to get off of the offensive tackle, it feels like he forgets to use his hands at time, and he's just playing too many snaps to kind of continually play like that and then consistently get what you want out of the defense. To get back to your overall point a little bit too, I think that this is, I think you're 100% right. You don't need this defense to be absolutely killer. You need it to be respectable, right? And I will say that, like, the one bright spot of this defense, I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but the one bright spot of this defense is, man, those defensive tackles played well in this game.
It's almost sickening, honestly. Like, it's almost sickening that they have not one, not two, but three defensive tackles who are all playing above average, and it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's like after wishing for something so hard, it's like the genie granted our wish, and it's like the classic "be careful what you wish for" situation. I mean, we would be remiss to just not talk about how good Kenny Clark and Zua looked at different points. There certainly weren't perfect games. There was a time when Clark couldn't keep his feet on one of the touchdown runs, but I mean, there was also times when they got inside the 20 and Solomon Thomas literally made 4 straight plays to completely shut down an entire drive by himself. And there were other times when Kenny Clark and Odigizua were racing to split a sack. So I know it's like, in some ways the Cowboys are so much better than they were at any point last year at certain specific things. But in very real ways, it just feels like they're still very discombobulated on the back end. Their talent isn't matching their production on any points, and the pass rush, it just needs to get developed, and it just doesn't feel like it's gotten anywhere in these first few weeks, which is not surprising, I guess.
It doesn't feel like they have any more holes than they had last year, because Donovan Wilson's still Donovan Wilson. The linebackers can be up and down. I do want to say I thought Kenneth Murray played better this week than he did last
yes,
week.
We should
point it out. At least give him credit.
Yes.
But you don't have a Micah Parsons type of player that can kind of cover up all those weaknesses. And now you're seeing all those weak points get exposed. And it's not like all 11 players are bad, because they're not. They've got some really good talent. They just have 3 or 4 guys out in the field on any given moment that offenses can attack. And I'm not sure how you're going to be able to cover up those guys unless they just start to play better.
Well, here's how you do it. The problem is that this defense is built, the corners, the coverages they want to play, all of it is built on being able to get pressure with 4 guys, right? And it feels a lot more possible with a guy like Micah Parsons as one of those 4 guys. You don't have him anymore, clearly. So you have to find a way to generate that pressure. Unfortunately, what that means is that you probably have to start adding a 5th and 6th guy. That means blitzing, which I'm sure you've got the numbers right here to tell me when the Cowboys do it, which is not very often so far this season, they're pretty darn successful at doing it. So
fourth most successful blitzing team in the league, but they just don't blitz that often.
And look, to be fair, part of their success may be tied to the fact that they don't blitz very often, right. So the element of surprise is probably adding into it. But it's not enough like that, that I wouldn't be blitzing a lot more. So the Cowboys need to think about including more blitz packages just to supplement things. And look, maybe not having Bland is this week and potentially next week is kind of what's giving them a little bit more hesitancy here. But I think Reddy Stewart played decently enough that if they can figure out their communication issues on the back end, they should increase the blitzing just to kind of pressure, especially a young quarterback coming up like Caleb Williams. It just feels like it's something that's going to be better at getting a little more pressure on these guys.
I think they also need to marry the offensive philosophy and how good that unit is with their defensive philosophy, because it's almost like Matty Eberflus is a bend but don't break defensive coordinator, right? And you want that style to kind of keep possessions down generally. Like, you want teams to have to put together 12 and 13 play drives. But the Cowboys offense is so good that I want to see them have more drives and more opportunities, right? Like we saw on Sunday, what the Cowboys had 1 possession in the first quarter. I think they had 3 total in the first half. We want to get those to like 4 or 5 possessions. And if you get beat, down the field quickly by a blitz, so be it. At least the offense is coming back on the field. I almost wonder if Matt Eberflus is the wrong type of defensive coordinator as it stands right now for an offense that's this explosive.
He just doesn't have the horses,
No,
that's the issue.
Blitz.
Yeah, and so that's why they need to blitz a little bit more. And I do agree, like, press the issue. What's the point of playing off coverage zone if you're going to give up big touchdowns anyways? Press the issue. Shorten the time, get the ball back, and let your offense start to score points. I mean, at this point, the way the Cowboys offense looks, I'll take a shootout with almost any team in the league at this point.
And that's the point. Like, I'd rather give up 34 points and create 2 turnovers or a couple big sacks and give my offense more opportunities than what we saw on Sunday, which was, hey, Dak, you guys have to score a touchdown every single time in the second half just to keep this game competitive. We'll see if Eberflus changes it up as the season goes on. Let's talk about that Cowboys offense, which was lights out in the second half. Why did they shine? We'll get to it next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all of the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every single model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make your everyday drives feel like anything but, with smooth handling, with incredible controls, and with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV. You can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you could end up leaving money on the table. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together, all in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, let's talk about the Cowboys offense in this one. How did they score 40 points? Why were they so successful?
It just felt like by the end of this game that the Cowboys offensive line had started to really wear down the Giants defensive line. And it just felt like things started to work in a way that they hadn't been working earlier. You watched the tape early in the game, and it felt like they struggled to kind of, first of all, they didn't get a lot of possessions, so it makes it hard to kind of get into a rhythm. You're sitting on the bench for a long time, and then you go out there and basically 3 and out. Even though you kind of produce 2 successful plays, you can't convert that 3rd and short, and you're forced to punt, and then basically you don't touch the ball again until almost the second quarter, right? And then after that, it felt like the Cowboys struggled to kind of get the ball down the field to their playmakers until a little bit later in the game, and things were blocked up a little bit cleaner for Dak. And then he was just absolutely the bravest quarterback I've ever seen, just standing in the face of pressure and delivering strikes on deep crossers to 88. And that's kind of what it felt like opened things up. There was a couple other throws to Ferguson that was really kind of helping to kind of spread things out a little bit. One thing I really want to talk about is the ability of Clayton Adams to produce, a run game and a pass protection plan that really kind of accentuated what they were doing in the run game as well. They did a really good job. And one thing they've added to their repertoire that we haven't really seen as much is there's an old saying in play action is that if you want to sell your play action, pull your guard. And they've started doing that a lot more. And I think you can do that when you've got a guard like Tyler Smith who can be comfortable on the edge, who can pull out there and then stop and suddenly become an edge pass protector because he's familiar with doing it. And I think that was what was, I think, the big difference that bought them enough time to get that first big kind of seam in route to Ferguson. I can't remember. I think it was in the third quarter that really felt like it kind of opened things up a little bit, right? So great job to kind of get creative with protection against, what is kind of an overmatched offensive line at this point. They're young and they're playing a really good pass rush. But really good job of Clayton Adams and Dak Prescott to kind of recognize what they needed to do in order to get the ball down the field and then execute that really well.
I mean, they were adamant too that they were going to improve the run game this year. It wasn't just going to be all this talk like Mike McCarthy did a lot of times about improving. They actually have improved. And I mean, it helps that Javonte Williams is running hard, but they're opening up lanes. They're pulling more guys. There was a couple duo blocks where, I mean, they were just moving guys off the line. Yeah, I mean, that part of it's really nice. The other thing that I noticed when I went back and watched the game is it feels like in the second half, the Cowboys kind of came to the realization like, okay, throwing the ball downfield to George Pickens is not a bad idea. And like, there's usually three of the four outcomes are good, right? It's either a completion, it's either a defensive pass interference, it's an incompletion, which is fine, or an interception. Take your chances, right? And I was looking today, thanks to True Media, that George Pickens already has 80 defensive pass interference yards drawn through 2 games. And he's third in the NFL since 2023. Like, lean into that. And I think you're going to see more of that over the next couple of weeks. Like, if George Pickens is one-on-one, just throw the ball up there and give him a chance to let him draw a penalty, because that's how a lot of the touchdown drive started on Sunday.
Yeah, it felt like it was layers, right? They were peeling away the onion. They got Ferguson involved, and that kind of opened things on the outside. Then you saw the deep crossers to Lamb, and the final piece, right, was throwing the 9 to Pickens down the field. And like you said, at first they didn't complete any of them, right? But they were getting penalties and they were moving the ball and they were converting because, it was egregious too. It wasn't like, Pickens was giving me gimme things on underthrows. No. He was being pulled to the ground. So yeah. And then I think there was another fade ball to the end zone that Dak just didn't throw it right to Pickens. But by the end of the game, Dak was really locked in on getting the ball down the field and was very successful. And then I think the other big thing too is that they started to run the ball even more successfully than they were earlier in the game. Williams just had an absolutely masterful game. I mean, we can't talk about this anymore without being. I mean, we had such low expectations for a guy like him. For him to come in and play the way he has through 2 weeks has really been impressive. Down to just small, stupid things like. One of the big problems that the Cowboys have had is so far early in this season is dealing with chips on the outside within pass protection, right? It's become a problem where one time Williams bumped a guy too far inside on a twist and Booker couldn't get back inside. There was another time today, or I'm sorry, in this last game where it was 87 who was able to get a chip out to Burns and pushed him out too far wide, and because he gave him so much of an angle, it actually gave him a two-way go on Guyton, who was kind of dislodged from the rest of the offensive line to get to the quarterback really easily. So Williams later in the game realized what he had done, and then instead of doing the same thing this time in the chip, he just got in the way of Burns, and Burns had to get around him, then get around Guyton, and
that's the way it's supposed to be done. You just want to slow them down. You're not actually really blocking. You're just getting in the way for a half second and then moving on.
And then that was enough to kind of have that same play be a completion later on. Later at the 2-minute warning, when he got a swing pass, he trucked a Debo, which was an awesome play, but it was also smart because they were in the 2-minute drill, and he got out of bounds while moving forward, which meant that the clock could stop as opposed to having a running clock. So just really, really great stuff. And then the last thing before we run out of offensive time, I just feel like the offensive line blocking has been absolutely tremendous, but I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't mention Brevin Spanford's name, because my God, if you go back and watch the tape, please just go watch Brevin Spanford tape, because it was unbelievable. On the Williams run to the outside, he took his guy, pulled him all the way to the side, buried him. On another play, he comes down and fumbles it, does some cleanup job to a linebacker on one of the big runs, buries him. And then if you only watch one play, please just go watch the 4-yard Miles Sanders touchdown run, where he takes Okoronkwo, he finds him, latches him, turns him, buries him, and then as everybody else is celebrating the touchdown, I think he's reading Okoroku's last rites. If they didn't meet after the game and have a fight, then Bobby Okoroku is now legally BSF's son, as far as I'm concerned.
Last thing before we move on, this offense, when Kevontae Turpin went out with the injury, I think it was the neck injury, it took them a series or two to kind of figure out what to do, because there was a stretch where Kevontae Turpin got 4 straight touches and all of them were successful. He also scored one of the first touchdowns of the game. I can't believe I'm saying it, but there is a big drop off between Kevontae Turpin as wide receiver 3 and Jalen Tolbert as wide receiver 4. Like, they missed Turpin on offense at different moments of this game.
We tried to tell you all throughout training camp, they were serious about making Kevontae Turpin a featured weapon in this offense through 2 weeks. That's absolutely the truth.
All right, let's talk about a big injury on offense that the Cowboys will have to deal with over the next 2 months. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether that's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in the live action as the game unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team, the Dallas Cowboys, or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add just a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. The NFL season is finally here, so for your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you to the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Landon, the Cowboys had a big injury coming out of week 2. Cooper Beebe, their starting center, he's dealing with from what I've been told, it's a foot injury. Yeah, he's got an ankle sprain, but he's also got a broken bone in his foot. It's not a high ankle sprain, which has been what's been reported out there. Now, the Cowboys are optimistic that it's going to be closer to that 6-game timetable, but he is on the injured reserve list. We know he's going to miss 4 games. How big of a loss is this for Dallas?
It's hard to say, right? I think it's a big loss. Like it's a big loss because he's been playing great. He's an ascending player. You want to see him continue to develop. He's a young player who needs to continue to have snaps. You want continuity on your young offensive line, right? Like that's just a huge part of this. The reason that I even hesitated, right, is that you know the strongest backup that you may have on your team is Brock Hoffman, right? Like a guy that, frankly, you had penciled in as a starter on your offensive line up until draft day. So I think that you're gonna see a drop off because Brock Hoffman is not quite as physically strong, I think, as Cooper Beebe. So
he's
in
also
some of those,
30 pounds lighter and less athletic. Yeah,
for sure. But I think he plays with a level of tenacity that, and again, I think it matters a little bit less at center where you can cover. It's easier to cover up than like maybe even at guard at certain spots, right? So I do think that the Cowboys are going to be okay. It's not going to be debilitating, but it certainly takes an edge off of what was a huge part of what this Cowboys offense is about.
It's a loss because it's a second-year guy that was ascending. There was a couple blocks that he made where he was pulling and then he came back around to protect Dak on I think it was that big throw to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, you could just see that his confidence was getting better. And it's frustrating that he got hurt on a field goal, or it might have been an extra point. I think it was an extra point.
This extra point.
Because now you're just down one offensive lineman. And you're right. Brock Hoffman's a really good backup, but now you're starting to get thin at that position because you've already had Robert Jones, who you signed this offseason. He's out for the year. And now it's Beebe, who's going to miss the next 2 months. And Shadik Charles had an injury. So, you're kind of down to your last 2 guys here. Luckily, Bass and Hoffman are 2 of the guys you feel really good about. Yeah. But we're getting close to the end here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and look, I mean, it's clear if you just look around the league, it's everywhere right now. It seems like there's a high number of injuries of a lot of high profile players. Specifically, I think there's something like 5 starting quarterbacks that potentially aren't going to be playing this upcoming week. So we're in it. Like, this is the rough time for injuries, because as teams kind of just get used to the rigors of regular season, they build up that callus. Some of these guys are going to suffer some of these kind of injuries that take them out for a quarter or half of the season.
And honestly, the worst part is I feel bad for Cooper Beebe, because he missed time last year with an injury. It was his first year being a full-time center. He just needs these reps. Like, he needs to go out there and play. And you felt like you had something really developing with the 5 offensive linemen out there. And yet again, it's another offensive line change. We'll see what it looks like when Cooper Beebe gets back. But this is a guy that you're putting a lot of your hopes and faith in. He's just not going to be out there. I'm just more bummed for Cooper Beebe than anything else.
If I'm allowed to, could we change the subject just slightly, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
I wonder if you might have to consider 2 changes on the offensive line at a certain point, because I'm starting to worry about where Terrence Steele is in some of these snaps. I think he's just being very up and down. And I think you saw something with Nate Thomas at a certain point that you started to feel pretty comfortable about it. And we've heard whispers from Brian Broaddus and others that have suggested that maybe Thomas could be an ascending player that they want to start seeing. And so I think if Steele continues to just be a very up and down player instead of the steady veteran presence that you were looking for, maybe you lean into the youth of this offensive line and you start getting Thomas ready for a starting role a year earlier than you expected.
Don't think the Cowboys haven't looked at that cap number 2 with Terrence Steele. And I think they could save $14 million if they designate him as a post June 1 cut next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're already starting to look ahead. And maybe they feel like, hey, Nate Thomas is a guy. And Stephen Jones said it. Stephen Jones said, like, Nate Thomas is somebody we want to get on the field. We'll see if it happens in the next couple of weeks. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.